Hello, and welcome to the Bot Nirvana podcast, where we dive into all things digital automation. I'm your host, Nandan Mullakara. While I'm not podcasting, I help people keep up with the fast-changing digital technologies at botnirvana.org. I hope you enjoy the show. Let's get right into it. We have Gurdeep Singh on our digital automation podcast today. Gurdeep Singh is the Automation Center of Excellence lead at Tryg, which is Scandinavia's largest insurance company. In this podcast, we chat about his Lean RPA CoE and his learnings in establishing the same. We delve into LLMs and AI use cases for the insurance industry. He also shares many practical tips for everyone on their automation journey. Let's listen in. Hi Gurdeep, welcome to the Bot Nirvana podcast. It's great having you today. Can we start with a quick intro about yourself?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, and I would like to say thanks a lot for calling me over. I'm a follower of your videos and podcasts, and I think you do a fantastic job on there. And definitely a lot of information is imparted. So thanks a lot and kudos, and definitely thanks for calling me up. So as you know, my name is Gurdeep. I've come with 20 years of experience in business process and transformation, process reengineering across the globe. I've been extensively working in the US, UK, and the European markets and the Southeast Asia. I'm a certified Lean Six Sigma black belt, so a lot of my initiatives come from that background as well. And from an education standpoint, it's been in total quality management. So you'll see that it's a combination of Lean Six Sigma, quality management, automation. So all together, clubbing it together, it's more like a technical functional guy who loves to improve things, optimize things, and then bring a new perspective towards the table. So that's broadly around the way I operate and the way I have. I've worked with a lot of consulting, started my career with GE Financials, moved on to Genpact and Accenture, and now I'm part of Tryg, which is the largest insurance company in the Scandinavia. So that's been my overall role. Currently, I'm associated as an automation CoE lead and the tools and innovation lead now. So a lot of engagement with the business, with the automation vendor partners, and innovation is something which is part of my kitty.
Wow, excellent. And I think it's a dream combination.
Yeah.
You have the process optimization experience, the technical background, and the enthusiasm to do it also. And right now into automation, which is one of the key areas, right? Especially with AI coming into the fold. So we'll talk about AI, but can you take us through your automation journey?
Absolutely. I think we started up with or at least I started up with the entire automation thing back in 2014. So it's been almost 9-10 years that I've been there in the space. And we started up with robotics that came into the picture at that time. Some of the key vanilla players in the market today, they started up the big forum of discussions and optimizing with automation through robotics. And through that, we went ahead and established the robotics CoE that we have today, or the automation CoE. So predominantly in my automation CoE, I have a combination of robotics and workflow management tools, some of the other technologies like, chatbots, virtual chat agents, and everything else, text and speech analytics, and combination of all of that to make it more intelligent automation. So that's been my journey altogether in the last couple of years. My journey, or our journey in the organization and also outside, has been what I usually call it as a sail on high tides, because we have seen some areas where we have been flourishing very well, but there have been definitely experiences where we have failed, we have burned our hands, and then realized that either we moved too fast or we did not assess everything, and so on and so forth. But altogether, what I've seen is that it's very important to have clarity in the vision that you have from an automation perspective. What do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? What are the key areas you would like to focus upon? It's not about just you driving it, but it's more about collaboration and proactiveness with the other areas. It can be with the business, with the core IT, with vendor partners, or other technologies. Being open and evolving and continuously introspecting the way you can make the things better. That's another key engagement learning that I have over the period of time. Education is definitely a key aspect, not only for yourself, but also for the business, because usually business and customers have a very specific demand with respect to the business domain. And it's very important for us as consultants to understand what the business demand is and translate that into a technical demand and then a technical solution into a practical solution. So that journey of translating a practical problem to a practical solution goes through an entire technical engagement. And that translate a lot of times information get, lost in between the cracks and fall between the chairs. And that's entire framework establishment is something which is the key. Yeah. So if you're able to do that really well and be open to feedback and engage with other technologies, not limiting to one, I think that's something which is the key. I've also learned that we should never be afraid of failures, because that's something which would restrict us from innovating and trying new things out. And I think, and I strongly believe that the engagements I've been part of in last 10 years, specifically in the automation domain, luckily I've got a lot of customers and people who've been open to these kind of engagements and innovation and supported us to take it forward and engaging things by themselves. So altogether, a lot of learning, but that's why I call it sales on high tides, because you never know what's going to come. But at least every time you learn to sail on something which is good, then you start improvising and moving it forward with the learning that you have.
Yeah. And I love your term of sail on the high tides, because, just as in life, you'll go through your ups and your downs. So be ready for it, right? And yeah, and I really, what struck me is that you mentioned a lot of things in that whole framework, starting from people, culture, education, innovation. So everything, and technology, and everything has to come together to form what's this framework that can carry you through this tides, right? I mean, in your good times as well as bad times, it should carry you through. Yeah, awesome. And so you did mention earlier that you're a Lean Six Sigma practitioner and all that comes together. And I think you practice something called as a Lean RPA or Lean automation, right? So what is that? Can you share with our audience?
I think so. How I define Lean RPA CoE or Lean RPA setup is where you are optimally utilizing the resources that you have. Right. Now, in Lean, you have a concept called downtime, which is basically about defects, overproduction, transportation, non-utilization of resources, motion, and inventory and errors. Right. Now, what we did was to classify everything that we have as a structure in our robotics CoE or an automation CoE under these, that is there any kind of a waste or activity that falls in this category? Then classify it and say, okay, can we live with it? Or does it have an impact on our operations? Or should we eliminate or simplify or standardize something? And then going ahead and having discussions with the right stakeholders to see, okay, how can we do it? So for example, it's as small as, the kind of virtual environments that you use, or the application licenses that you use, or the human resources and the knowledge of the business that we use. Is it being used the optimal way? Once we have the setup, then how can we actually go ahead and set up a structure where once the structure is there, how it can be validated, measured, and controlled. So having the right reporting structure in place for each and every robot or automation solution which we have, making it more transparent and governed and making it accessible to the business, because it's not us who are the real customers, it's the business who's the real customer.
Right.
So they need to see how their team member, like a robot, is a team member that works. Because when I have these kind of discussions with business, I tell them that, see, don't consider it as a robot or a machine. Consider it as a team member that you have. So robots would fail. They would they also would have a bad stomach if wrong input goes, right? Like humans. Right. So they need to be mentored and trained and invested at a real good time, right? And when we start doing that change management in the attitude and the perspective towards robots, right, from the business and the actual owners, then they start actually contributing to it. And that actually helps us in driving these lean initiatives, because then we use our resources more optimally, their time more optimally, we can measure them more optimally, and then find out areas where we can improve and reintrospect ourselves over the period of time, and then celebrate the success at the end of the day, because that's most important when it comes to these kind of things. Orchestration of resources, orchestration of services, orchestration of licenses, everything is very important, and it's a key, right? So once you're able to map down everything and identify that it falls in any kind of downtime, so to say, waste then how can you improve and eliminate some of them one by one, and then optimize your process, and continuous improvements can't come into the picture. So that's basically a very high level discussion about what it looks like. I have a detailed blog that I've written on, or an article on LinkedIn about it. So a lot of more details are there as well on the same
Okay.
space.
So yeah, I'll put a link to that article so that people can explore that more. It's an interesting concept to eliminate waste and have a RPA CoE which is very optimized, right? So as you went about this journey, what have you found? Which were the key areas of optimization in your Lean RPA journey?
A lot of them, actually. To start with, is it's definitely about how the entire RPA setup is done, because looking towards a centralized or a decentralized setup, right?
Right.
How you utilize your resources and application resources, utilizing your human resources and their domain expertise, right? Because when you take somebody from the business to help you design a solution as a problem, their time is very important, because they have been taken away from the operation, which is their core job. Right. So how can you optimally utilize this? How can you leverage technologies like today to do that? So rather than creating SOPs, and then everyone knows like how SOPs are, they are the happy path defined the best possible way, right? But not the exception, because that's where any kind of a solution would fail. So not only being dependent on users as domain experts to explain it to you, but use techniques like task mining or process recordings and step-by-step graphing of the digital footprints that are left behind, and then putting it to perspective. For example, leveraging process mining to understand the process and the process variations, to what degree the processes variation exists. So all those kind of things are something which we definitely use. It's, as I've said, you asked about what are the key observations. I think one of the key observations is the criticality of the process, because business or people who do it on day in, day out understand that the process might be very simple, but when you put it, let's say, for example, through a process mining solution, then you see the digital footprints, and that visualizes your entire process. And then you see that actually you have a process with, let's say, 10,000 different ways of doing things, right? And then you realize, oh, it is such a variation-based process, and because everyone does it different ways, and a lot of things can be standardized, but it still has variation. So that's one of the key things. A lot of times we see that business or IT have their own agenda of driving optimization, and then sometimes they have their own perspective looking at things, which is where IT sometimes come back with an inside-out approach. Business is looking from an outside-in approach. So we need to merge them together. And that's where we play a critical role, where we go back and say, okay, we need to look at from a customer's perspective. And that's how the paradigm shift happens, where you change from an inside-out to an outside-in approach, and then start thinking from a customer or an end customer's perspective, and then start putting it together, rather than just developing a solution and say, okay, business, now you can use it. But that's not what they wanted, right? So now looking at it from their perspective and then developing a solution, that's another aspect that we uncovered.
Yeah, and that's an important aspect, because so far in IT, what we've been doing is create applications. I mean, we've been in an era of creating applications or customizing ERPs and throwing it over the wall and saying, here you have it. This is how IT works, and you better handle it. To understanding the customer's perspective and working with them. And I think that's what this whole new journey of automation AI is, where we are going more towards IT is becoming part of the business and more customer aligned. And so how do you see this transformation happening now? Like, now that we are seeing AI also come into the fold, right? So I just wanted to take a step back now and see, you're also a tools lead, right? So you've now a tools and innovation lead as well as a COE lead. So now you've built around a whole tool ecosystem, which consists of, I don't know, RPA probably, and you did mention process mining. I don't know if you have task mining or anything. So how does your ecosystem look like, and how did you go about building it? How did you select your vendors? What was the criteria used, and how is that? What has been the challenges? What has been your learnings there?
Yeah. I think so. How I'll address it is like it has got multiple factors to it. Number one is how we build up the ecosystem. So the base concept is supposed to be that your ecosystem should be open and open to that, right? So which means that you can actually go ahead and adopt any kind of a tool, whether it's coming from one vendor or the other, or it's a multi-vendor strategy or whatever you have. So it needs to be an open ecosystem and an open architecture. So we as an organization and in our area as well has been a strong advocate of open architecture and open ecosystem. So we definitely practice that as a core. The second thing is that we look towards building modular segments and then looking at from an end-to-end value chain perspective. So a concept that we used to use in Six Sigma was the SIPOC approach, which is, from the supplier and the process and the output and the customer and the input and all that stuff. So that's where we actually went ahead and defined the entire value chain and say, okay, who's my supplier of information? What is the information that I get? And what is the form of that information? What is the process that I do? Then what is the output that I give from that process, and who is the end customer, right? So mapping down the entire SIPOC actually helped us in understanding the entire value chain. So our ecosystem build-up happened, okay, now that, for example, I start with robotics, right? So if I move to robotics, what is my input that I get from a lead generation standpoint or areas of improvement? So, okay, somebody from the business comes and gives me. Is there a way I can improve that? Okay, there is a way of doing that. So probably I can use process mining or I can use task mining to do things better. Like process mining goes ahead and gives me a visualization of my entire process, shows bottlenecks, most happy path, what is the degree of that happy path, and so on and so forth, right? So a lot of visualization and data that I get. Now, once I identify that, okay, I have now the entire process in front of me, now I can say, okay, what can be improved? I need to optimize the way I improve it or gather that information one level down at an application or a process level. Now, what I can do is I can look at the SOPs and other things, but that would not give me the entire horizon of information that is there or the different variations in the process. Then probably I can use task mining to actually document that and then go ahead and say, okay, now I'm trying to build the dots together. So that generates a demand for new tools for me, right? And asking those things. Then I go ahead and say, okay, now I have developed everything. Now the business wants to know how it is performing, how things can be better, and so on and so forth. So I can say, okay, now I need to have more strong BI tools. I probably need to have a one view which can be gamified with things which are more important to the business, ability to reach out a bigger audience in doing things, and so on and so forth. So probably I might just move out to some of the Microsoft products and say, okay, how can I visualize these things from a business perspective more effectively? Or the business might come back and say, okay, now I want to actually not only understand the process, but also give information, as in keeping human in the loop. So is there another tool that I can leverage out to make the human in the loop, right? So basically, it's the entire value chain that helps us in identifying the tools that we can use and then going out in the market. The second part which you asked about is selection of the vendors. Now, there are three criteria on which we select the vendors, basically. The three criteria are one of the base criteria. Now, when I say the base criteria is that they should be cloud native or cloud open. They should be future ready. So which means that they should have a proper roadmap in front of them, that what they want to do, how they want to do it, and things like that. They should be open to a multi-vendor strategy, right? Because we don't want to get vendor locked into something. They should have an open architecture in place, that which means that it's more API first and microservices first, or kind of thing, or connectors which are already built, and so things like that. Then the second segment comes as a technical one, where we go into more depths and details to understand, okay, for example, if I'm using, let's say, a conversational bot, then what is my speech to text or text to text speed rate, and so on and so forth. Like, where are the servers, what rate at which the translation happens, and so on and so forth. So a lot of technical aspects, how their data is constrained and how it is managed. And last but not the least is the functional part of it, which talks about how it would help my processes and businesses. What capabilities does it have? And at the same time, the entire industry of insurance and financial institution is a trust-based industry. And which means that our trust is entrusted with a lot of data privacy and data control and governance and regulations that are there. And that's why we give a lot of emphasis on how strong the entire data governance part is into it. So coming back to the same thing, you have the core, you have the technical, and then you have the control and governance on the data and the data handling part of it with the functional ones. So that combined together helps us in identifying the right vendors to do things better, and how which can be a good vendor for us. And then we do small POCs, POTs, and POVs, right? Depending upon the maturity of the technology. So, for example, if the technology is not mature enough, it's just budding up. So probably we'll go ahead with the POT to understand what is the technology capabilities. If it is mature but not in the region or nobody has used it in the industry, then we go with the POV to see, okay, what value does it bring? If everything is there and it's been done, accepted in the market, then we go with POCs. So these kind of approaches is something which we go ahead and harness to drive these kind of initiatives for.
Awesome. So as I said earlier, we'll talk about AI because that's a thing taking center stage now, especially the LLMs and foundation models are coming in. So how is that impacting your tool ecosystem, your program right now?
I think it's quite immature or premature right now, I would say, because the generative AI has just come in. Language models or NLP, NLVs, and ML has been there for a while, and we have been using that in different areas in partnership with different vendors and internal teams who develop it. But when it comes to large language models and generative AI, we are evaluating the use cases, how we can do things, how we can leverage it. But what we strongly believe is that both generative AI, LLMs, and insurance industry, they need each other. And there's a very good reason for that. Now, first of all, I'll talk about why insurance industry needs it. Because insurance industry generates a lot of data with every transaction. So there's a lot of information that comes in. There's a lot of customer interaction that happens. There's a plethora of information that gets stored in different areas, and understanding and digesting it is a lot of challenge for the business and also for the IT. So generative AI definitely, and the LLMs can definitely help in customizing and consuming it more efficiently and effectively, and speed up the time to market to some of our solutions. Also, it would help us in getting more interactive and personalized to our customers, because that's what is the need of the hour, right? Because customer is the key over here. Now, the more we know about our customer with the data that we have, the better we'll be able to customize solutions for them, the better we'll be able to provide them services, and the better we'll be able to collaborate with them and others in the market. So definitely speed to market, automation, being more close to the customer, ability to understand the entire customer journey, and finding automation opportunities is something which is the need of the hour for insurance. And historically, insurance industry has been the laggers in this one because of obvious reasons. And obviously one of them has been rules and regulation and regulatory, PI and everything else. And that's where what I've seen is insurance industries are now stepping forward proactively and driving and accepting the challenge and seeing how we can learn with the insurtech mindset, but at the same time with the muscle of strong domain expertise in insurance. So a combination of both of them actually helps insurance industry move forward. The second point which I said is why generative AI and LLM needs insurance industry is because one of the things is, which I spoke about in some time back, was the entire insurance industry or financial institution based on the factor of trust. And today, when LLMs and generative AI is there, it's good to use as private. When it comes to commercial utilization, trust is something which is evident, right? And that's where if there are adopters in insurance industries and the ability to challenge with respect to regulations and controls and PIIs and all that stuff, if we are able to do that, these models and this entire setup of the ecosystem would get more mature, and they'll get mature faster. And that's why they need us as well, because when it comes to insurance industry, you'll always find a devil's advocate sitting down and say, okay, what if this goes wrong, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that ability to challenge the status quo and being the devil's advocate or being skeptical at everything with looking at it from that lens actually improves the capability of LLMs and generative AI to optimize. And at the same time, every kind of associated regulation around cybersecurity and the utilization of these would get more mature and get mature faster. Historically, we have seen that insurance industry has been arm's length to these things, and that's why it took quite some time for some of the new technologies to mature. But now with the adoption, a lot of times you just go back and ask, okay, what if happened this, right? How do you secure this? How do you handle my data, right? Can I make it a hybrid? Can I put some portion in the cloud and some on my own premises? Can I do that? Do I have that kind of capability? So a lot of can I do and how would I do kind of questions helps us in maturing.
Yeah. And I think some powerful use cases, like you mentioned, of personalization, of automation, maybe even like things like sentiment analysis. So multiple streams of AI practical aspects, very juicy for the insurance industry. But the data governance, I think, still is something like in the past, it's still something you need to get over. But I like the way you're saying both of you need each other. And so it's probably a collaboration where the insurance industry must work with the foundation models to understand what your data governance needs are and for the foundation models to incorporate it. As well as, I think maybe from your side, in looking at various models, now you have the Llama 2 model, which has come out, which is free for commercial use. So maybe use that for all your sensitive data, whereas they use the powerful foundation models where you can maybe for personalization with some data which is generalized or something like that. So what do you think about it? How will this progress, especially in the insurance industry? How will you adopt this?
One of the, and this is, and I'm smiling because this is one of the things that I've been working on recently, and then soon, maybe next week, there would be an article on this one as well.
Okay.
So one of the things that we want to focus on is, or should focus on as an insurance industry or the other industry, is the AI sandbox, which needs to be very important to understand how we can get all the capabilities of AI technologies and models and everything else in a pre-production environment, totally isolated or containerized, and see how we can improve it, right? What are the different factors we should look into it, right? How my PII data masking would work, or how my role-based accesses would be granted, or how my data modeling, data harness, data harmonization and everything would work, how my models would be put into picture, right, for practical use, how can I actually go ahead and utilize an API first approach, or how can I have tokenization or licensing and all that stuff. So a lot of this AI sandbox environment is something which is going to be pivotal aspect towards pushing it out, right? So that's something which is definitely critical. The other aspect is continuous testing of these tools on small scale and isolation. Now, for example, the Llama 2, that's open for commercial use. But would insurance industry go in and use it? The answer might be no, because they'll say, okay, yeah, it is open to use, but then I need to understand how my data flow would work, what it would use. Is it just using my prompt and my prompt engineering part of it? Or is it also using the data that I put in my prompts, right? Or how do I structure my prompts? Does my prompt structure has got any impact on my customer behavior or my internal user behavior, or the kind of products that I'm looking at and all that stuff? So there are a lot of questions into it, right? Which actually raises a question. So these things actually help us in understanding that what is the big question mark and how can we solve that? And then going ahead and saying, okay, now I understand that these are my challenges or questions around from an insurance regulatory perspective. Can I work with these foundation models, or at least with the major vendors in the market to say, okay, how can I customize it? Let's say, for example, the basic control guards or rail guards around the LLM would be, okay, any kind of biasness with respect to cascade color, or any PII information, or any abusive information, or any kind of a recommendation which is not good in health of public interest, kind of that is blocked as an output, or has been monitored for that perspective. But at the same time, is that enough from an insurance standpoint? But insurance might just go back and say, okay, apart from that, I also need something which is related to fraud, or I need something which is more relative to to double insurance or something like that, or probably something which is more on social media or data mining from social minings and so on and so forth. So probably I'll put more guardrails around it and say, okay, now my data or my output looks more intelligent comparatively. And it's not the basic model.
Right.
Because when you look at it, there are different levels of complexity. One is the large language model, which is there, which is based on a huge amount of data. But then you have the geographical language as well that plays a critical role. Then you have a domain language like insurance or telephonic industry or for example hospitality or something else. They have a domain specific information. A particular term in insurance might mean something different than in a financial institution, right? So you have a domain specific one. And then you have within insurance, for example, you have product level, language and all that models as well. So fine tuning at that degree needs to be done to come up and say, okay, how is my output looks like? And then we can't just have guardrails on the big LLMs. We need to have guardrails on each one of them, right? Because the perspective of things changes drastically with these information.
And like you mentioned, there needs to be a fine tuning for each of the aspects. It's it's the language, it's your domain language, it is even your organization's data, and within your organization maybe even your group's data. And I think that's where the foundation models, we can do this fine tuning and we can do some of it as part of the prompt. But what we are finding is that these cloud based models, they're keeping on changing, and they need to do that so that they remain competitive. But then we have many people facing now a prompt drift, in the sense that they model for something and now the outputs are becoming different. And that's where I think the release of Llama 2 model and will future see much more powerful models come in, which you can take it, put it in your enterprise. It's a powerful model. You don't know what it will do, but at least you have some model which you can freeze in and maybe version it and use it for your particular purposes. So I think we are in really exciting times here. So and it's going to impact a lot in our automation journey. I think in some ways the whole RPA and automation has been laying the framework, like leaders like you laying the framework, laying the frameworks like we discussed earlier, which can be now used to bring in technologies like AI. It's always been the case. We always said that RPA is a stepping stone to AI. So it's a great place for us to be. So I think you are in a good place having implemented digital automation and bringing it in. But for people who are just starting out and want to start out on their AI automation journey, any piece of advice before we wrap up?
Yeah, definitely. I think, first of all, it's never too late. So the fear of FOMO should not be there, right? Or fear of missing out should not be there, because it's always there. You can always improvise. First movers definitely have a set of challenges, which is like high investments, high risk, definitely some of the big failures and fines and everything else, right? So, but you should not have the FOMO, right? So that's one. Second is start small, understand what you want to do, right? Don't put all of your eggs in one basket, right? So that's also there. So be very careful and cognizant with that. Be open to feedback, be collaborative, do regular retrospections, look from outside in perspective, not from inside out, because somebody just come back and say, we should have a digital transformation done, and then you do digital transformation, and that's not what is the need of the hour by the business, right? So it's very important that we understand what the business requirements are. Maybe you're not ready right now to do that, right? Mm-hmm. So it's very important to be open from that perspective and understand what you want to achieve. How do you want to achieve it? Start small. Don't be afraid to fail. Collaborate with different part of the organization, look at from a customer's perspective, and then definitely look into things more maturely over the period of time and say, okay, how can I be better at what I've done, let's say 6 months back, right? It's not a race. I mean, if you run really fast, then you'll fall. There's a high probability. Can you really afford that? This is a question as well. So I think it's very important that you evaluate everything, be mature in understanding it. Don't try and do it alone. Have your friends, have your collaboration teams along with you, work with closely with IT and the business, have it right, and then take it forward. So I think that's the piece of advice that I'll give to everyone. And obviously, a lot of things are there. Continuously improve yourself with those inputs.
Yeah, continuously improve by doing, right? By trying. Yeah, get away from FOMO, but keep doing things, because the technology is ever changing. You cannot, hope for a position where, yeah, this technology is now stabilized, now let me embrace it. No, by the time the technology has moved on, and we have seen that people, early movers, have that advantage, because you just got to dive in, or jump in and start learning and start experimenting and learning. Like you say, start small, experiment and learn, and keep going on the journey. So yeah, great advice there, Gurdeep. So thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Great insights for the audience. So before we go, one final thing, where can people find and connect with you?
I think I'm widely available on LinkedIn. I think that's the best way of doing it. So definitely, and I think when you put your broadcast, if you can put the link to my profile, that would be great as well. I regularly put up a lot of articles on blogs, and I do have some networking organizations I'm associated with. So I do speak over there, and then a lot of things come from that, those networking sites as well. So a lot of information is something which is there on my profile. So definitely keep learning, keep evolving. That's what I say always. So let's do that.
Yeah, and you also mentioned, don't do it alone. Network and learn from everyone, because you don't need to reinvent the wheel. That's what we also do at Bot Nirvana. So great having you again. I'll put your link to your profile as well as some of your articles so that people can read it. So thank you again, Gurdeep. It's been an awesome chat. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you for joining the Bot Nirvana podcast. Appreciate if you can leave a review on iTunes or wherever you're consuming your podcast. Catch the show notes on botnirvana.org. While you are there, feel free to explore more free digital automation resources and more. See you next time.